it is now confirmed that Nova Scotia's Audrey Parker has died. It was a death that was planned and peaceful, but happened sooner than she preferred. Parker suffered from stage 4 breast cancer that had spread to her brain. She chose to die today for fear she would not be legally allowed to later. Sarah Galashan joins me now with Parker's story. So Sarah, we knew it was coming. Parker was very forthcoming about her reasons and her wishes.
Yeah, Andrew, she was, and at 57 years old, surrounded by family and friends, Audrey Parker died peacefully in her home. She had said, and I quote, that she wanted a beautiful death, a fabulous end-of-life experience on her own terms. And in a press release that has really just come to us, that press release reads that a beautiful death is what she got, though, and this is the reason, of course, we're talking about the fact that Audrey Parker has passed. That death came sooner than she actually wanted. Christmas is actually her favorite time of year, as it is for so many people. And of course, we're just 2 months away. And medically speaking, there was certainly a possibility that she could have hung on until that point. But because the cancer had spread to the lining of her brain, she couldn't be sure that she would have the cognitive function or ability to give consent at a later date than today. And so, you know, despite the fact that she had been approved for medically assisted death, she had previously consented to it, she couldn't be sure she'd be of sound mind to give what they call last-minute consent. And so that's why she died today. She spoke to CBC about this problem she was facing back in September. I want to play you a little bit of that interview.
It's time for me to go, and I want to go peacefully and beautifully. I had 2 years trying to get on top of the pain, and man, I suffered. I'm palliative now. There's really nothing that can be done. I think once I've signed the papers and have agreed, it should stand. But I still have to worry that if I lose my marbles, they won't do it.
As part of that press release that we've just received, there are actually quotes from Audrey Parker, and I want to read you one. It reads, "My last wish is that my fellow Canadians across this beautiful nation will speak out and insist on changing this law so that everyone who is terminally ill has the right to a cruelty-free death." Andrew?
Now, her campaign to have this law changed will live on, and it has sparked a good deal of discussion already.
Right. Well, and because this was planned, of course, it was on the calendar for at least a little while. Her friends, her family, media, politicians all made aware that this was going to happen. And today in the House of Commons during question period, the federal government's health minister actually spoke about the death of Audrey Parker. I want to play that.
I'd like to stand in this House and give my sincere condolences to the family of Miss Parker. If I could have given her authorization for advance request, I would have absolutely done so. But as parliamentarians, we know that the laws that we make are for all Canadians. That's why we've put in place a group of experts to look at 3 sensitive areas as we want to protect our vulnerable Canadians. We want them to look at the issue involving advance consent, also the issue of mature minors, and also for serious mental health issues. Once again, Mr. Speaker, we will continue to work on this matter, and I look forward to receiving the experts' report. Thank you.
Now, on that expert panel that has been convened to look into the issues and ethics surrounding last-minute or late-stage consent, pardon me, Tim Staten is a member of that panel. He works out at the University of British Columbia's Social Work School, and he talked about what is behind making a decision like this.
Well, the problem is the uncertainty that it creates, that we don't know if that's exactly what the person would choose at that time. And we're talking about, you know, arguably the most momentous decision anyone's ever going to make, and a decision that absolutely cannot be reversed.
Speaking to Audrey Parker's last wish that I talked about a little earlier, Dying with Dignity Canada is going to be submitting a bill to Ottawa next week. They're calling it Audrey's Amendment, and they would like it to address late-stage consent and make it so that patients who are in Audrey's similar situation can live day to day and not have to worry about cognitive function down the line. Andrew?
All right, Sarah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Shanaz Gokul is the CEO of Dying with Dignity Canada, which is the leading national organization defending Canadians' end-of-life rights. And she joins me now in studio. So your organization, you had a relationship with Audrey, and you spoke with her on the phone over the past few weeks. Can you tell us about the message Audrey wanted to send to Canadians in her final days?
One of the things that Audrey helped us to see at Dying with Dignity Canada is there is a fourth category of people that are excluded from the legislation, people like her who have made a request, who have an active request where they were assessed by 2 independent clinicians. They were approved, but because she was at high risk of losing capacity, she was in a position where she was forced today to die too early, when she really just wanted one more Christmas with her friends and family. And our hearts really go out to her friends and family today. But Audrey, in dying and in the weeks that led up to this, she really wanted Canadians to understand that she didn't want to die today. She wanted to wait a little bit longer. But once you lose that window, if you are at risk of losing capacity, then you will not be able to go ahead with an assisted death. So Audrey has helped us define a new category that was always there. People who have been assessed and approved for medical assistance in dying should be allowed, even if they slip into capacity before they're able to.
Do you have confidence that there will be an amendment that will change the legislation so that somebody in a very similar situation as Audrey in the future, that she won't have to go too soon?
Well, that's certainly what Audrey's message was, and why she, worked so hard as she did in the weeks before she died today. And I was encouraged to hear the federal health minister say that if she could change the law herself, she would. And they can change the law. I mean, what we see in Audrey's case, and this is really important for people to understand, it is a very grave and severe violation of her Section 7 charter rights to life, liberty, and security of the person. Audrey gave up valuable, precious days, weeks, maybe even a couple of months, so that she wouldn't have to die horribly. That's something that we have to remedy, and we can't wait for it, because there are many other people, unfortunately, who have been in the same situation and will be in the same situation. And the longer it takes for the government to act, the more people like Audrey are going to be forced to either, die too early or die horribly if they lose capacity.
So what do you say about, the uncertainty that you can give consent in the moment, but then if you lose capacity, there's no way of knowing whether or not that consent would be given in the weeks or months during which you become incapacitated?
Well, I think we could perhaps look at the made request form that people have to complete, that has to be signed by 2 independent witnesses, requesting medical assistance in dying. And maybe we add another line that says, please take this form as confirmation of my consent should I lose capacity in the days and weeks ahead, that I want to be allowed to proceed with medical assistance in dying. Not everyone will choose to sign that individually. So I think that there are options here for us to move forward. And I also don't want to lose sight of the other group of people who are excluded, people who have diagnoses like dementia and other capacity eroding conditions, where they will die with those conditions, but maybe not for many years down the road, where they know they will lose capacity. They should also be allowed to make an advance request.
Do you understand the government's position in saying, we're worried about vulnerable people, we're worried about a slippery slope kind of argument that this could put vulnerable people at risk? Well,
I would say that that's exactly where we are with Audrey Parker today. She was a high-risk, vulnerable person, and high risk because of her the precariousness of her medical condition to lose capacity. So what happened today is we have now got a law that's supposed to protect the most vulnerable. It didn't protect Audrey Parker, who could have lived for days, weeks, or a couple of more months to have one last holiday season for her friend. And it doesn't protect people who have dementia, who aren't able to make an advance request. They are outside of the law. So if we're talking about not protecting vulnerable people, we already are not protecting.
Was there nothing the government could do? We heard the health minister say if she could have provided the authorization, she would have, but she couldn't. Is that totally true?
The government could have allowed for people in Audrey's category who've been assessed and approved in 2016 when they drafted the legislation, when organizations like ours and many other experts said that this was what this would do. It would force some people to die too early, to make the same cruel choice that the Supreme Court of Canada in the Carter decision looked at, the choice of dying too early or not being able to have any choice and dying horribly. So they can legislate on this. And we're really talking about upholding people's rights, the rights not to be discriminated because of the precariousness of your medical condition or the diagnosis that you might have if you have dementia. This is about human rights and ensuring that we aren't arbitrarily discriminating against people. And I do feel that's exactly what happened with Audrey Parker. So my plea to the government is Audrey's plea. She said to me yesterday, Shanaz, I want you to let Canadians know that with my dying breath tomorrow, that I having to have the assisted death tomorrow and being forced to die early, it's just wrong. And I really hope that the government hears that plea. We will be moving forward with a new campaign. We want to share stories of people who've experienced the same injustice, the lack of protection that the law provides them, where their loved one had to die too early, or where they're contemplating dying too early right now. There are other Audreys out there, and this is, she didn't do this for herself, speaking publicly and being so courageous and so vulnerable. She knew it wasn't going to help her, but her commitment was to the country and to the rest of us to ensure that someone else and their families and friends don't have to go through the same cruel choice.
Shanaz, good of you to come in on a tough day, on a sad day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shanaz Gokul is the CEO of Dying with Dignity Canada. She joined us here in the studio.